how should we think about rest so that we don't feel guilty?
We should think of rest as a right and not a reward.
Oh, can you unpack that for us? A
Sure.
right, not a reward.
We often get the message from childhood that rest and recreation is a reward for productivity, right? You do well, you get something extra. So you have to do your chores, then you can go play. Do your homework, then you can go play video games. If you don't work hard in class, can't go to recess. There's all these, and there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. Like, people want to teach children responsibility and priorities and all of that. But sometimes the unintended message is, I can't go do the fun thing. I can't go do the rest thing until the productive thing is done. And that's fine when you're a kid and your list of things that must be done is finite. Right? If you're
Unpack
12,
your backpack.
Yeah, unpack your backpack, take out the trash and do the dishes, and great, then go run off and do whatever. And then you become a 35-year-old woman and you're like, wait, but the things that have to be done is like unpack the backpacks, then do the dishes, then take the trash out, then feed the cats, then vacuum the floors, then scrub the baseboards, and then call the doctor, and it's like we think we have to get the whole list done before we can rest and relax. And so we never relax. And when we finally burn out, or we get overwhelmed and we collapse and we're frozen and we think to ourselves, I'm resting now, but you're not, because people who rest in shame work in shame. People who work in shame rest in shame. When you think that all of those tasks are moral obligations and you're not going to be good enough if you can't stay on top of it, then if you do go and sit down, all you're thinking about are the things you should be doing, and you don't actually rest. And so you get up, now you're behind and you're tired and you think, I can't do this. And then for a lot of people, they get so overwhelmed and burnt out that they kind of go frozen and can't do anything. And then they go, well, I must be lazy. I must try harder. I got to do more. When it's like, whoa, maybe you need to do less.
How do you put that into action? Because as you were talking, I'm like, that's me. Because I don't know anybody, at least no women, that are able to truly take a break, rest, and not feel guilty about it.
Yeah. So I think that there's been a lot of talk about taking breaks and how important that is. And I want to go in a slightly different direction. One, because a lot of people can't. Like they physically can't.
Yeah.
Things will fall apart. Things will not be functional right? And I think that if you are someone privileged enough to have the time, money, energy to be able to take breaks, then you've heard that advice. You can just go do that, right?
Right.
So instead of thinking about, well, how am I going to get a break? How am I going to get a break? How am I going to break? And yes, we need breaks. However, let's think instead about how we can get rest by just making things easier for ourselves. So the example that I use a lot is, let's say you have a mom and she's overwhelmed. Maybe she's a single mom, she's overwhelmed. And so the traditional sense of a break would be like, well, can you get someone to babysit the kids so that you can take a few hours a week?
Right.
Great, that's fine, that's nice. But
But
if
you
they
know
can't
what?
do that?
That doesn't happen, because then you think it's going to take me time to find somebody, and then I'm going to have to coordinate it, and then I'm going to owe them the 2 hours. And so that's a wonderful thing for researchers to recommend. But in a normal person's life, it doesn't fucking happen.
Yeah, so instead, let's go, how can we make something easier? So what if Friday nights at this woman's house are rest nights? And instead of cooking, she orders a pizza. Or instead of cooking, she makes a giant grazing plate for her kids. And she puts it out and goes, eat what you want. Or if they're older, what if she goes, it's make your own dinner night, and I don't care what you make. Get the ice cream out of the freezer. I don't care, right? So you find a way to give yourself a big break on how you're feeding. And then you say Friday nights are also movie nights. And that means we all make a pallet in the floor, we turn on the TV, and I don't care what time you go to bed. And in those few hours, Maybe she doesn't get to go anywhere. Maybe she's not, maybe she can step away and do a fun project, but at the least she gets to sit there and do nothing and things are just easier. There are no dishes to clean up. She uses paper plates. She doesn't have to do the bedtime rigmarole of who, I don't want to sleep and read me another story. No, we're just going to sit here and watch TV, or that's the night we all sleep in mom's bed, or that's the night, right? Like, let's find a way to make Fridays or Sunday afternoons or Saturday mornings easier for a period of time where you just kind of go hands off, needs are met, your kids are going to think it's fun, you're going to give yourself a break. I think that's why.
You have a concept called fair rest. And for those of you that are living with family or a roommate and you feel like you're the one that does everything, what is the concept of fair rest? And how can you use it so that the kind of division of labor, so to speak, which almost never really works in people's households and in the apartments that you share with roommates, how do you use this concept of fair rest?
So this is a different way of looking at division of labor, because the traditional way of looking at it is equal labor. So the work should be equal. But when you talk about the work should be equal, let's just say we're talking about a marriage, what that sets you up for is comparison, competition, and like every man for himself, because then it's me having to prove the labor that I'm doing and how worthy it is. And then my husband has to prove how valuable his labor is and who's doing more. And unless you have the exact same job, and even then, it's like, who's going to compare a corporate attorney to an author or a stay-at-home mom? Like, you can't, a coal miner to a teacher, to a psychotherapist, to a doctor, like you can't, there's all sorts of different ways why people's jobs are difficult or any of those things. So it makes, I have to look out for me. I have to prove the value of my labor and then fight for, only getting what's going to be fair. No. Back it up. It doesn't actually matter whether the work is equal. It matters whether the rest is fair. And to make the rest fair, it might be that one person's going to be working more or harder than the other in different seasons. So an example of this might be, let's say that an easy example, let's take that corporate attorney and that stay-at-home mom, and they're going, and he's going, I work so many hours, and she's going, I work nonstop too. And we look at how can we work together to make sure each of us is getting fair rest. And you can look and go, okay, well, what if that corporate attorney, even though he works all the time, he's still off the clock sometimes. And he still gets that lunch break. He still has what we call time autonomy to decide what and when to do things. And you have this stay-at-home parent who, has a more flexible schedule. Maybe she does get to have that rest in the middle of the day or something, but she's also doing care tasks which are cyclical in nature. They never stop. She's always on call. Right. And so it might be that they need to have a conversation about, on Saturdays, you be the default parent.
Right.
You be the one that changes the diapers and makes the dinners and, listens for the fights and does those things. And on Sundays, I'll be the default parent. And on when you're not the default parent, you get to just exist in your home. You get to go read a book. You get to do this. You get to do that. Now, that's not a prescription. That's not going to work for everybody. But if you have a dentist and a teacher, let's talk about fair rest. Let's talk about both of us deserve at certain point at night to clock out. We both deserve a functional house, but everyone deserves to clock out of home labor and out of house labor. It shouldn't be the case that one person spends most of their time facilitating the life of the other.
Whoa. And what I liked best about what you said, because you once again flipped the paradigm, is that for most of us that are struggling with division of labor in our relationships and households, we're in a deadlock and a fight about the importance of the work that you're doing, justifying that you need time off. And, interestingly, when I started, my career, this part of my career and my speaking business really took off, it was at a moment in time where Chris had left the restaurant business. And he was what we started calling the first call parent, which meant he was the first person on the list at school that got called when there was something going on. And he was a stay-at-home dad. And what I noticed was very interesting. And that is that as I took on the role of primary and solo breadwinner, I also took on the gender kind of stereotype of feeling like my work was more important.
Mm-hmm.
And here I had been the first call parent for over a decade. And yet now that I'm making the money and I'm doing all the things and I'm out and I'm traveling and I'm working and I'm bringing home the baby and I'm doing all this stuff, I, as a woman, valued my contribution as much more than what my husband was doing by taking care of the kids. And we would have all of these battles about, I need time, but you've been out and I haven't had a break. But we were in the non-stereotypical gender roles in our marriage. And I found it extremely enlightening how work out of the house or the type of work that you do makes you think you deserve more.
Yeah.
And by making the conversation about rest, because we all believe that and can see that we deserve rest. And in talking about the fact that when you're the first call parents, you're in a never-ending cycle. There is no lunch break. There is no time off while somebody's taking a nap because you're probably trying to fold laundry. You need rest. And so by talking about it in this way, it actually brings compassion instead of competition into it. I love that. I love that. I love that.
And I was thinking about this the other day, there's been a lot of talk on my TikTok channel about division of labor, and especially this idea of, well, if I bring home the bills, that they should be taking care of everything else. And I think, and then you have, well, this is actually being at home's harder. Well, actually, and then we get in the competition. But
Yeah.
Think of it this way. There's a big difference between a couple saying, hey, this is how much I work, and here are the things that need to get done. And if you were to do X, Y, Z, then how can we divide these so that you and I have the maximum amount of free time? It's not about what do I deserve, I shouldn't have to take out the trash because I did X, Y, Z. It's if I take out the trash right now while he's doing bedtime, then we'll both get to hang out afterwards.
It's not a tit for tat.
It's not. It's, okay, we decided that, I'm going to stay home and you're going to do this. And because of the amount you work, I'll do most of this stuff. Not because, I have to pull my weight or you don't have to do this, but because it just makes the most sense because then we can both have time. But the other half of that is having an explicit conversation about what is sort of the minimum standard of functionality, because everybody deserves to function, and
Right.
letting go of perfectionism. One of the reasons why I think we miss this conversation is that it's not just about who's taking out the trash. It's also about when one of you comes home and the trash isn't taken out, how do we respond to that? Do we go right to accusatory? Do we go right to, you should have done it? Do we go right to, or do we go to grace? Do we go, wow, I wonder if they had a hard day today?
I am guilty of all of this. Chris and I have had all of these issues in our marriage. The one thing that's very triggering for Chris is when I stack the cardboard boxes by the garage door and I don't flatten them. And when he sees the tower of cardboard boxes, he says, look, I feel like you think I'm the maid here. And so we've had that conversation. I got a lot out of this concept of fair rest and maximizing the amount of free time. And I'm going to bring that into my conversations with Chris because we haven't talked about it that way. What flipped it for me, Casey, is that I started to see how gross it was that I was adopting this very masculine, traditional value work hire. Even though I'm didn't feel that way at all, it's almost as if society itself had me absorb those messages because it's so insidious the way it can impact you. I started to realize I can't do what I do and have the family life that I want without him here full time.
Oh, yeah.
There's not another person I can pay. Like even that, well, what would I pay somebody to clean the house? It's not the same because that's their dad. And so it's priceless. And so when I finally absorbed that and I believed it and felt it, we became equal in terms of the contribution, but I've never had the conversation about what rest you need. How do we maximize our time together? How can we be in better partnership? And I think that's a game changer. Complete
It's
game
especially
changer.
a game changer when you have that first call parent, because unless the person who's not that default parent, they have to be proactive about inserting themselves into situations in order for that first call parent to rest, even if they're still at the house, right? Because you'll often have a dynamic where, okay, partner A is the default most of the time. And so when someone cries, do I wait to see if they're going to do it? And if they don't, okay, I'll do it. If they're busy, I'll do it. I help, I do. Okay, but it's not just if they're busy, you do it. It's sometimes you have to get up and do it so they don't have to. They don't have to be busy. That's not the only justification for being able to just sit on your couch for more than 5 minutes at a time.
It's a right to rest.
Yes.
Not a reward. I keep getting DMs and forms submitted at melrobbins.com/podcast where people are writing in feeling overwhelmed and they're making themselves wrong for not feeling motivated. They're looking for motivation.